Welcome to the David Spisak Show. I'm so glad that you took the time to join me, and I, as always, am focused on delivering you as much value as humanly possible in return for the fact that you were kind enough to give me your time. So today, I want to talk to you about something that affects a lot of people, because pretty much all of us in some form or fashion, at some point during the course of the next year and beyond, we're going to be either buying something or selling something or both. And so the title of this podcast episode is Price versus Experience. It's kind of a lifelong battle or contention, to focus on price or to focus on experience. And, we humans, we're interesting in so many ways. We're peculiar as well. And in many ways, one of them is the fact that conditioning, the fact that the way we're conditioned to think, the things we associate with during the course of our lives as we learn new things, biased as we experience things and experience themselves, they all tend to lock us in to a certain way of thinking. We don't think about that in real time as it's happening, but face it, the way that you approach things in certain situations is almost guaranteed to be based 100% on how somebody taught you, how you learned, what a manager told you in the past, or how you've experienced, or how you've always done it. There's a great joke somebody told me, or story. I don't know that it's a joke. It's more of a story. But somebody shared this with me literally decades ago, and it has never left my mind. And it goes like this. There's a guy, let's call him Bob, is married to a young woman named Susan. And Bob noticed one day that when Susan was making a roast, like a pot roast, that before she stuck it in the roasting pan, the first thing she did was she stuck it on the counter, she took out the knife and she whacked off the right side of it and she whacked off the left side of it and she stuck it in the pan and off she went. And he asked her, on a particular day, he says, why? I'm just curious. I notice you always do that when you're making a roast. Why do you do that? And she goes, well, it's the way my mom always did it. And he goes, all right, that's interesting. So one day it happens to be like a special occasion or a special holiday event, and it just so happens that the entire family's there. And on this particular day, luckily it just so happened that Susan's mom was there, but also the grandma was there. Susan's mom's mom was also there. And this came in handy, and I'll tell you why. Because during the course of the day, Bob happened to walk into the kitchen, and he sees Susan's mom, and he says, hey, Mary, can I ask you a question? And she says, absolutely, Bob, what is it? He says, this is something I've just always wondered, every time that Susan makes a roast, I noticed that before she sticks it in the roasting pan, she slices off the right, she slices off the left, puts it in the pan, off it goes into the oven. I asked her, why do you do that? And she says, well, it's just the way my mom always did it. So I was just curious, why do you do that? And she said, well, I hate to say it, but that's the way my mom always did it. And he thought, oh, goodness sake. So anyways, it just so happened, like I said, Grandma was there. And so he happened to walk up to Grandma on this particular occasion, and he says, hey, Louise, he says, do you mind if I ask you a question? And she says, of course, what do you want to know? And he says, well, it's going to sound funny, but I was noticing that when Susan makes a roast, before she sticks it in the pan, she always slices off the right side and the left side, and then she sticks it in the pan. I said, why do you do that? And she said, well, that's the way my mom always did it. So I walked up to Mary just now and I asked her, and she said, well, that's the way my mom always did it. So I was just curious, why did you do that? And she says, it's so funny. You're going to laugh. You see, when my husband, Sam, and I first got married, we honestly didn't have any money. And so we only had one pan. And that pan was not a particularly large pan. So oftentimes, when I would go buy a roast at the market, it typically was always larger, a little bit larger than the pan. And so what I would do is I would cut off the right side of it and I'd stick in the pan. It didn't fit. And then I'd take some off the left, and then I could be able to fit it in the pan. So that's why, is because we just had that smaller pan. Isn't that a great illustration of us as human beings? You know, chances are there are parts of your life, things in your life, situations in your life where you are no different, I'm no different than Susan. We do it simply because that's the way it's always been done. It's the way my manager taught me, and that's the way their manager taught them. So I wanted to bring this up today because it really has an impact on the way that we conduct all areas of our life, especially, or I should say, in this particular case, when we buy something or when we sell something. So stay tuned, stay with me. This is all going to come together. Now, some people are very lucky. The lucky few are raised in a way that they were literally taught and conditioned to think in a very specific way that benefits them their entire life. You see, their parents taught them with intentionality because perhaps they learned this lesson that was I just shared with you. And so they wanted to make sure that their kids, and maybe this is a student or their students, benefited from their life's experience. Now, how you think about everything now is not all based simply on what is like the best way, but rather it's the way that you were taught. So it's the way someone you know has always done it, like I said, or it's just the way that you think, you personally think, because of bias that things should be done. But I want to challenge you to ask yourself a simple question. If your current personal situation, your financial status, your career trajectory, just your satisfaction in life or other aspects of your life are not where you know they should be right now or even close, my question I want you to ask yourself is, why are you still so loyal and so committed to those very same things that brought you to where you are now? If it's not getting you where you need to go, then I don't know why we would be committed to those on an ongoing basis. People ask me if I teach or coach people on best practices, and I always say no, because that would be terrible for them and terrible for their business. You see, best practices are deeply flawed in my humble opinion, because every best practice, literally every best practice I've ever been exposed to, was not actually associated with the undeniable best results of an individual, but rather the best results within some particular group. And, you know, this may sound like a I don't know, crazy analogy, but I was thinking, have you ever been in a situation, maybe you go to your kid's school and you hear the kids sing, or maybe you happen to be in church. And have you ever noticed that if you were to take those people individually, undoubtedly, irrefutably, some of those people just flat cannot sing on key. They're off key, they're off pitch, they don't sound very good. And you might have 50 people in a church, or you may have 30 kids in a class. And there might be 6 or 8 or 10 that frankly probably are not destined to be professional singers. Let's just say that. But interestingly, when you throw them together in a group, like a chorus, all of a sudden they sound massively improved. They sound like they're in key, like they're in sync. And it's pretty tremendous the way that works. Well, I happen to think that that's an auditory version of best practices. So if I could throw things together in a group and I go, okay, well, let me not do what the worst performers are doing, and I'm certainly going to leave out what the top performers are doing. So it ends up being just kind of an average of that. In fact, most best practices in different industries, you know, if you were to take the entire group of companies or individuals being considered or measured for performance, it's typically the top 50% of the top 50%. In some cases, it's just the top 50%, which is, in some cases, the best of the worst and the worst of the best, as the great Jackie B. Cooper used to say. Jackie B. Cooper was just an icon in the automotive industry years and years ago. So why am I spending time on this when the title of the episode is Price versus Experience? Well, here's why. I think it's an important foundational element that has and will determine how nearly everyone goes about either selling or buying something. So whether you're part of a nonprofit, whether you sell cars, real estate, insurance, whether you're a manager, own a franchise, or any other endeavor where a transaction of any kind will take place, it always comes down to price versus experience. As a consumer, we will make a decision on where to buy, typically based on two factors, price and experience. Who's going to give me the best deal and or who's going to deliver the best experience, who's delivered the best buying experience. As a seller, we also make a decision to focus on price or to focus simply on the buying experience. The interesting thing is in both situations, our decisions will be closely aligned with what I touched on earlier. Our previous experience, how we've been conditioned to look at these situations, our bias, such as brands. Perhaps you're a Chevy person or a Ford person. Typically, it's either or. Somebody who loves Chevy never loves Ford. Somebody who loves Toyota never loves Honda, okay, as an example. Or it's a number of other factors that I mentioned earlier. So I'm challenging you to think differently because whether you are buying or selling something, I promise you will experience both the short-term and long-term benefit as a result of this change. So let's separate those, buyers and sellers. As a buyer, most hyper-focus on price, while experience, it is a factor, but less so than money. When somebody uses that as their mindset, they will consistently have a poor shopping and buying experience. It will be one that may cause some level of anxiety, frustration, brain damage, and ultimately, perhaps even buyer's remorse. You will also be far less likely to have a positive view or review of your experience. And why would you not? There's no such thing as Google or Amazon price reviews. It just says review your experience. Isn't that interesting? When you read reviews and they're average to poor, nearly 100% specifically mention their experience buying or their experience with the product or the service. Isn't it funny how the best price wasn't even a consolation prize for those people who gave 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 star? Isn't that interesting? Price doesn't matter anymore. On the other hand, every day people pay, according to Forbes and others, up to 10% or more when they receive a superior buying experience. And this includes even millennials and Gen Z shoppers. A lot of people think they think of things differently. All they care about is price. It's simply not true. These people have a completely different mindset. They are mostly or solely focused on the experience, not the price. And yet they consistently provide the 5-star reviews, great CSI, higher client retention, no buyer's remorse, testimonials, headlines, and they're all 1,000 times more likely to become huge advocates for the business they bought from. So, which would you prefer to be as a buyer? Which buyer would you prefer? Do you want to be one that experiences anxiety, stress, confrontation, brain damage, etc., to feel good for just literally, seemingly a moment because, hey, you won, you got the price that you wanted? Or would you rather have high levels of satisfaction, short and long term, and happiness, along with a stress-free experience? The latter, right? Am I right? Now, let's think about when you're selling something. It's no different. You want the better, stress-free, happier outcome as well, right? Well, then you have no choice but to think differently because most salespeople focus on price as well. Think about this. I want you to really think about this for a second, especially if you're a seller. So most people that are selling something focus on price. Why? Because they have been misguidedly conditioned that people buy because of price. You know what? Some people do. But here's an important point. Not the customers you want. Why? Because they will only ever be customers who transacted with you one time when you really want clients and advocates or champions that will transact with you over a lifetime. Many, many times. Think about the best, highest, most professional, respected sellers out there, the highest, most respected broker in your area, insurance broker, real estate broker, wealth manager. These guys all have portfolios of clients. There's no such thing as a portfolio of customers. They're all replaceable. It's the very reason why most businesses have to spend an inordinate or disproportionate amount of advertising, because they know they're leaking 40, 50, 60% of their previous customers out of the bucket, and they have to spend a lot of money in advertising to constantly be acquiring new ones. You see, the more they churn, the more they have to spend on advertising to replace them. So again, I want to challenge you to think differently. And you're going to need to also take a big leap of faith, because I know this is counterintuitive thinking. It's the exact opposite of what we've been taught in life. But trust me when I tell you that you will seriously and significantly upgrade your outcomes by making one seemingly minor shift that simply requires you to commit to it and abandon forever the methodologies and processes that have delivered consistently suboptimal, deficient results over months or even years. Throw those away, effective immediately. Now, if you want proof, no matter what your profession is, I want you to simply think about any top performing, highly respected, best-selling insurance broker, real estate agent, automotive salesperson, business salesperson, and I guarantee you they all have these hallmarks: consistently happier customers. And that's not just the day of the deal, it's long after the deal's done. Consistently more clients, not customers. Higher retention of those clients, higher average sales, higher average incomes, less stress, higher job satisfaction, less friction in their sales process, as well as many other benefits from that approach. What about those that focused on price? Well, it's the same list, just opposite outcomes. So as a seller, which one do you want? So does this all make sense now? As we wrap up, I want to give you, here's the major takeaways. Number one, if what you do currently, the processes you use, the methodologies you use, the beliefs you have, if they don't deliver you the results you want, they consistently fail to get you to where you want to be, then I need you to consider just ditching them. I mean, worst case, if this is your plan that you've come up with, this is what you've been using for weeks, months, or years, David, hey, I know how to do this. I just simply want you to pick it up, give it a good look, and say, hey, thanks so much for bringing me to this point. But I recognize today you can't get me from here to where I want to go and where I need to go. So I got to let you go. You got to ditch it. Got to throw it away. Maybe you want to file it if you're sentimental, but you got to let it go. 2, do things based on your desired outcome. This is future-based thinking rather than your experience or what you've been conditioned to do or your biases. That's past-based thinking. 3, if you're in the market to buy something, the experience is the most important and reliably accurate indicator of how you're going to feel after you purchase. And think about this. After you purchase literally could be 10 minutes after you purchase, an hour, a day. Buyer's remorse happens sometimes immediately after, but typically 2 or 3 days later. So if you focus on the experience and your key reason for buying from somebody is they delivered that spectacular experience, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be better than fine. You're going to be absolutely delighted with the decision you made. If you're selling anything, the single most important factor that will dictate your outcome, that will dictate the outcome of the transaction, your income, your career, your job satisfaction, how you see yourself, how much respect you have for yourself, how proud you are to tell people what you do, your income and everything else associated with your particular job, it's going to be based on delivering a superior buying experience. Fall in love with that. Become an expert at that. And stop relying on what typically most people would see as a shortcut. And that's trying to focus just simply on price. Last thing, once you commit to a superior approach, meaning whether you're buying or selling, you're also now committing to a superior outcome. Have you ever thought about that? When you commit to something that's delivered suboptimal results, you're committing to suboptimal outcomes. So this way, you're now committing to something that's going to deliver a superior outcome in every single way, including being somebody who's now able to teach, pass along, guide, help to bias or condition your kids, your associates, your family, and others in a great way so that they can consistently achieve the very same great results. You know, somebody taught me a long time ago that a groove and a rut physically are the same thing, right? The only difference is the outcome. Have you ever noticed that? If you're stuck in some way of doing things, and you say you're stuck, you're in a rut. And whenever you say that, everybody knows you're having a tough time. You're going through challenges. You've had negative outcomes. But when somebody says, hey, how are you doing? You go, man, I'm in a serious groove. It's the same thing. But a groove means you're on a winning streak. You're on a big time positive streak. Isn't that interesting? So I want to leave you with this. Today is a great time to get in the groove. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you'd be so kind as to please share, subscribe, or download this episode. Please take the time if you would. If you know somebody that this would benefit, please share it along with them as well. You can find more episodes at www.davidspisak.com. And I look forward to seeing you next time on The David Spisak Show. Thanks again.